Good morning. Hope you're off to a good Tuesday so far. You know, this time of year is always a fun time for our students, and I feel bad for them because they're not getting the extra fun days that they get to have at school. One of my favorites growing up in high school is when we get to have field day. Now, I wasn't naturally one of the most athletic people, but I did have a favorite event. I was very good at this event, and this event was tug of war. And I had a special place on the tug of war rope, and I was the anchor. I've always been a big guy. I've always been one of the biggest guys around my age group, and in high school it was no exception. And I could get in there with football players and baseball players and guys who had worked really hard all year out on the field, and I could have a part at field day in tug of war. And it seemed like every year, and I think for 4 years that my class, we went undefeated. And I think it's got a lot to do with that anchor that was on the back of the line. See, that anchor really did a good job of holding things back. And I have to say, I really did do well. I'm joking a little bit, but I really did do pretty good at it. But I wasn't in it alone either. It was those football players and those baseball players and those basketball players, all those guys who had been training all through the year, and some of them who were a head taller than me even, and some of them weighed almost as much as me but had probably twice the muscle back in high school days. And they had a lot of the strength that they brought to the team. And they helped us to be able to keep from being pulled over the line and instead pulling the other grades over the line to where we wanted them to be. You know, life at times, it feels like we're kind of running a lot of different things, and we think that we're at it in our own strength and we're doing a pretty good job. But then we get to a place where we start to realize that our feet are starting to slip out from under us, and the line is really getting pulled a little further than we think, and we didn't really have it as together as we thought we did. In Ephesians chapter 6, we read how Paul has been leading up to this point in Ephesians 4 and 5 and 6, and he's talking about living the righteous life, living a life that glorifies God, living a life that truly is different than the life that we've left behind. He goes on to talk about life with others and how children are to be, and how wives and husbands are to be, and even how people who work under other people, servants, or people who found themselves even as bond servants, how they're supposed to be, and how in all these ways we give glory back to the Lord, and we live out a life that exemplifies who it is that Jesus Christ has made us to be. And he goes on there in Ephesians chapter 6, he wraps it up and he says, finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. And at first you may think, well, this is just him wrapping up. But if you look back at all the parts before, you start to find out that in a lot of ways we're given a lot of instructions that on our own we can't do it. And on our own we can't be able to have the strength and the power to accomplish this task. He says, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. This word first, where it says to be strong, it really means to be filled with the power, or be filled with the strength of the Lord. Be strong in the Lord and in the power or the strength of his might, not in our own. And he goes on to say, he says, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. You know, in life we can have a lot of conflicts and a lot of struggles with our family members, with our neighbors, or with our friends, with our coworkers, and we can get to the place where we start to feel like, you know, the world's just at us all the time, or we're constantly being irritated by the people around us, or it's just that one more person, and we get our focus so much on the people around us. And what Paul would say here is to say that we don't wrestle against flesh and blood. It's not the people in our lives or even ourselves that is ultimately who we're at war with. A lot of it is that we also have a greater enemy. This past week in our sermon, Pastor Brooks talked about this enemy, the enemy of Satan. And here he says he's got a whole kingdom that's up against us. So we can't face this on our own. We can't tackle this in our own strength and in our own power. Instead, he says that we have a bigger force against us than what we can even see. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. That we can resist the devil and also stand our ground. That we don't get pulled over by what Satan's schemes are against us, the ways that he's testing out against us on a daily basis to bring us down. Instead, we stand in the power and the authority of God and the work that he's done in our lives. I want to encourage you to keep reading Ephesians chapter 6. Read about the spiritual armor that he's given us, the truth and the righteousness and the faith that he puts in our hearts. It starts only in a relationship with Jesus Christ, and he calls us to a life of prayer as we put on this armor each and every day. I'm praying for you as you go through the day. Hope you have a great one.